Good evening from Raleigh, North Carolina on this Friday, September the 22nd, first day of astronomical autumn 2017, recording this just before 9:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Remember to make all decisions based on official National Hurricane Center forecast and National Weather Service forecast products. So as we take a look at Category 3 Hurricane Maria, which is still churning out east of the Bahamas after its landfall on Puerto Rico the other 2 days ago now, Hurricane Maria is still a Category 3, still a major hurricane with winds sustained at maximum sustained winds at 125 miles per hour, and its pressure I think has dropped slightly earlier from 959 millibars, but we'll take a look at the advisory in just a minute and clarify those numbers, but still a very large storm. I'll give another view of the scale in a couple of minutes with another map I'll show here, but still a very large storm. You can see the islands of the Bahamas in the western part of this infrared satellite imagery. A lot of the Turks and Caicos down here. A lot of the Bahamian islands have avoided a direct hit from Hurricane Maria, as some were not so lucky with Hurricane Irma, but Hurricane Maria is taking a slight deviation from the track that Irma did take and is now well north of that. So a lot of these islands can breathe a sigh of relief that they did not take a direct hit. But this video will mainly focus on where Maria is going in the next few days and if there will be any mainland United States impact. So let's jump into that and take a look. So we're looking at infrared imagery here, and you can tell that the storm is a little disheveled. At first glance, you wouldn't immediately think hurricane. It doesn't really have that hurricane shape. If you look here, you can kind of see some of the outer bands fanning out. So if we had a visible satellite imagery, it might look a little more impressive, I guess you could say. But the infrared imagery showing that Maria is kind of struggling a bit, which is certainly good news for intensity forecast. But that's something to keep in mind as we go ahead, that weather models have a really hard time determining hurricane intensity, and I'll bring that point up again in a couple of minutes as we're looking at a couple of little bit of model data to determine where it's going. So still a dangerous storm, still churning out there, not moving very much, kind of on this north-northwest heading in this direction. You can't really tell. If I speed it up, you may be able to. And then you can't really tell the center of the storm because the eyes become obscured. But it certainly has looked to weaken a bit, which is certainly good news. So if we look, I spoke of shear earlier, and this is a really busy chart, but here is Hurricane Maria right here, north of Hispaniola. Here's Florida, here's the mainland United States. And these colors, the green represents favorable, yellow neutral, red unfavorable conditions in regard to wind shear for hurricane development. And right now, the flow, if you see these streamlines here, I'll show this again in a satellite loop, or an infrared satellite loop in a couple of minutes, but these streamlines are showing that the flow is coming out of the southwest here, so it's kind of pushing all of the convection, all of the action off of Maria's center and pushing it over, which is Maria's having kind of a hard time dealing with that, which is certainly good because it's weakening the storm. But as you can see, I cannot animate this to go forward, but it's expected that the shear will kind of ease up, allowing Maria to maybe become a little more symmetrical, maybe become a little bit more organized as it continues to move on its north-northwest trend. So hopefully the shear will weaken it enough to where it's not as strong as its maximum, it doesn't reach its maximum potential, but the wind shear is forecast to let up a little bit, and we'll see if that impacts Maria in any other ways. So we take a look at the forecast cone here. It looks a little different than the videos I did a couple of days ago, mainly because there's a lot of complicated steering processes going on with the remnants of Jose, which is up here, which I'll show in model imagery in a second. But there's a bit of a question now. This is the cone of uncertainty, remember. This is where the center of the storm could be. This doesn't represent all impacts will be limited inside of this cone. That is not what this cone is showing. This cone is showing the uncertainty, especially up here. This big area represents the center of Hurricane Maria could be anywhere within this cone. And obviously, as the days go out, you get more uncertainty because small, minute changes that add up over time can lead to large differences in the final position of the storm. And as we've noted before, this M represents major hurricane, category 3 or higher, and this H represents hurricane. So some good news is that as Hurricane Maria goes north and goes over some cooler waters, cooler ocean heat content will cause Maria to weaken a little bit into maybe a low in category 2 or a high in category 1 hurricane, certainly better than a major hurricane. As I mentioned earlier, maximum sustained winds at 125 miles per hour, movement north-northwest at 9. I don't see pressure value on here, but last I checked it was about 955 millibars. Don't quote me on that. That was from an earlier advisory. This is from the 8 p.m. advisory. I'm throwing this video together very quickly just to kind of get a general idea, so I don't have the pressure value, but it doesn't look like the storm is gaining a lot of strength quickly. This is going to be it's going to maintain its strength and hold its own, but probably end up succumbing to some of those strong winds out of the southwest shear and not really getting its act together before it moves over cooler waters and where it will weaken a little bit more. So to touch a little more on this, if you look carefully, Cape Hatteras here, down in Buxton, Rodanthe, some of the communities on the farthest east point of North Carolina of the Outer Banks are actually within the cone of uncertainty now. So that's that's kind of grasping at straws. Yeah, it's there, but it is indeed within the cone of uncertainty, meaning that the center of Maria could end up here. There's a possibility that it could end up here as it's in the cone of uncertainty. Another thing to take notice of, if I draw a little bit here, is the wind field of Maria is quite large. It's this area here. So that's about the size of maybe South Carolina, just as a general scale here. So if the center of Maria were to end up here, anywhere within here, it would have those tropical storm force sustained wind. There would be impacts. But something to keep in mind here is that as Maria continues on this path northward, it's probably going to expand. If you've watched Jose over the past few days, Jose, which is now a post-tropical cyclone, which is good news, it's finally starting to get away after lingering here for over 2 weeks. But Jose really grew in size, the wind field expanded. And what that pressure drop earlier that I mentioned that the aircraft reconnaissance may have been finding is actually related to the storm growing in size, the wind field expanding. So this will probably, I'll take a stab here. I think it'll probably double or something like that by the time it gets up here. So that if the hurricane's here, I don't want to confuse you with the track. So imagine the center of Maria would be over here, which would certainly be good news. The wind field of tropical storm force may reach, something like that. So the impacts would reach far, far outside of where just the center of the storm is. So if by chance Maria ended up over here and was on here sometime Wednesday, tropical storm force winds could be felt, far inland North Carolina out here. That was a bad circle, but you can get the idea that the impacts would reach far outside of just the center of the storm. So if we kind of look at why Maria would be taking this path here, we're going to look at some forecast guidance. And this is the American model. The global forecast is SIMGFS, 500 millibar geopotential height. What does that mean? That basically means that this is a fixed height in the atmosphere. So what you're looking at is pressure, where you have your blue shades, that's lower pressure, where you have warm shades, that's higher pressure. And what you can see here, this is, I almost said Irma, this is Maria down here over the eastern Bahamas. This is the remnants of Jose, which, as I said, is now a post-tropical cyclone. And this is a wider view. I'll zoom in a minute in the next pane I'm going to click on. But if I step forward in time here, what you'll see is that the remnants of Jose kind of leave an open door. There's a huge, if I get my marker back out here, there's a huge, something we call a Bermuda high out here. It's not really well defined, but there's a big high pressure that's kind of blocking out here. And at the same time, we have this ridge here, this ridging, and we have a high pressure over us. That's what's causing our unseasonably warm, hot, and kind of sticky weather. We didn't have much wind today. It was very hot. It's because we're under a high pressure. And what that's doing is currently allowing for Maria to follow on this northward trend. And the remnants of Jose actually kind of keep this separated. They keep these two high pressures separated, which kind of leave an open door for Maria. So if I clear off all of that, Maria kind of has an open door to go out to sea and then get pushed out by this trough that's forming over here. But the question is, how quickly will the remnants of Jose kind of disappear? If I step forward in time again, these are going in 6-hour intervals. If we push up here and go forward in time, you can see that Jose kind of disintegrates, and this ridge, toggle back and forth here, these ridges kind of connect. It becomes one. There's not a lot of noise in here. It just kind of comes to one smooth area of constant height here. And what that means is that the remnants of Jose the door kind of closes on Maria per se, and Maria kind of stalls out here until it's picked up and swept away by this next trough that starts to form here. Well, you're probably saying that's really close to North Carolina, and it is, because this has Maria, stalling out and almost drifting kind of westward into the Outer Banks. And if I'll zoom in here in a second to get a little more better resolution to see, but this would have tropical storm force winds and some direct impacts on eastern North Carolina. That's certainly not a scenario we want, but that westward trend has kind of been present and a couple of the ensemble models. This is just one snapshot. What I'm showing you here is not a definite solution. It's a computer model's idea based on mathematical equations on what may happen based on the current state of the storm. If Maria strengthens, that would change the solution. If Maria weakens, that would change the solution also. If the remnants of Jose weaken quicker than forecasted, that would change the solution also. If the remnants of Jose start drifting out to sea quicker, that would change the solution. So you see what kind of wall we're up against here with, we have all this information, but it's limited by, what the weather does in the next 5 minutes. So you may see people, post forecast models and say, that's the definitive solution. That's what's going to happen. There's going to be East Coast strike. Well, not really, because even in the next model run, it's probably going to be vastly different. I think I can even show you here. Yeah, okay, so this is the 18Z run. That means it's about the midday today run. If I go back, I'm hitting the down arrow on my keyboard here. This shows you where Maria was forecast to be on the last model run. That's 200, 300 miles to the east. If I go back again, it's up here. Again, it's all over the place. So these solutions have been trending westward, but that's not a definitive solution. So if I zoom in here, see a little bit of detail. If I step forward in time, once again on 6-hour increments here, here's the remnants of Jose. There's a high out here, keeping Maria to the west. There's also a high over here, which is bringing us our hot weather here in North Carolina, about 8 degrees above average. And this keeps the door open for Maria. It continues working its way northward. But as Jose begins to disintegrate and fall apart, this becomes one smooth ridge that continues out into the ocean. This would be the mechanism back here that pushes Maria out to sea. Of course, it's in the Midwest here. It's in the middle part of the country. It has to get all the way over here, but there's nothing else to really push Maria, so it stalls out and slows down. So the question's going to become, how fast is this trough going to amplify and develop to where it pushes Maria out to sea? Right now, this has Maria getting uncomfortably close. Still is probably a Category 1, maybe Category 2 hurricane. The wind field would extend, into central North Carolina. We would feel some effects more so than we did with just some blustery conditions with Irma. This would be a little bit more concentrated with maybe some rain inland and things like that. It's not showing a direct landfall, which is certainly good news. That can't be ruled out of the question yet because, like I said, Cape Hatteras and areas right here are still within the cone of uncertainty. So it's going to be imperative that we watch future model runs to see what exactly is expected to do. But as for the Carolinas here, it's really a time of just wait and see how this starts to develop because, just as this is modeling Maria coming up to the coast, this is also modeling the trough back here. The trough could end up being a little stronger. It could be a little weaker. That is going to really end up determining what happens to Maria and when it gets pushed out. So the the answer of where's Maria going to go, even 3 or 4, I guess today is Friday, so 4 to 5 days out. This would be Wednesday, by the way. This would be valid Wednesday morning through Wednesday afternoon into Thursday. That's when the timing of this is. So we're talking about something that's 4 to 5 days out. Still don't have a definitive answer, and we'll never have a definitive answer 4 or 5 days out, but we may have a better idea in the future when better computing power comes along. But right now, we're limited by taking a snapshot of what the weather is and then putting that into the future. So bottom line here, the takeaway from this, Maria is going to be, it's probably going to continue north, and then as Jose kind of dissipates, gets absorbed back into this larger ridge here, this is going to be the key mechanism as it goes forward here. This trough that develops is going to be what pushes, imagine a wedge being driven down right into here. That's what's going to push, imagine a big wedge being pushed and Maria kind of has this orb of influence around it. That's what's going to be pushing Maria out to sea. So it's going to be a wait and see thing. If I zoom out here, you can kind of see the current image, the scale. It's a very large storm. The wind field's very large. So I'll leave it on this loop for you to look at and kind of get a scale image. But to wind this video up, that's generally what we have. We have a Category 3 hurricane, which is expected to weaken as it moves north into cooler waters. Right now it's dealing with some shear, kind of having some trouble staying organized. Certainly good news for intensity, but the forecast and the future path of the storm is really dependent on upper level atmospheric steering currents. So it's a wait and see kind of thing. Impacts are possible in central North Carolina, but we have to wait and see. So stay tuned to the latest. I'll have another video update sometime tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. And in the meantime, stay safe and send me any questions if you have them, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.